evening, and welcome to Day 2 of the 2021 Milwaukee Film Festival presented by Associated Bank. I'm Kara, and I'm the Artistic Director at Milwaukee Film, and you're here for the Nightcap presented by the Yabuki Family Foundation. A couple of reminders before we get started. Don't forget to vote. You cast your vote for the Alan H. Budd and Suzanne L. Seelig Audience Award by going to the film that you saw at watch.mkefilm.org, the main website, and there's a ballot button there. It says vote, and you click through, and you'll be presented with a ballot where 1 is poor and 5 means the film was excellent. You'll want to make sure to get those ballots in by 11:59 p.m. on the 19th, because new this year, we're going to be announcing all of our awards at a virtual awards ceremony right wherever you're watching tonight at 7 p.m. on closing night of the festival on May 20th. So make sure you vote before the polls close, and we will let you know which films you all have chosen as our audience award winners. You also may have seen in watching the films that we once again have a double up challenge. This year, thanks to the generosity of Susan and Bob Michelet, if we are able to raise from you all $50,000 during the 15 days of the festival, they will double that, meaning we get $100,000 in total. A couple of ways that you can help us meet this challenge. You can text double up to 44321. You can go to our website, mkefilm.org/donate. Or if you're not already a member, or if your membership is about to renew this month, if you renew or join us as a member, that money also goes toward this challenge. Please help us make that challenge. As of this morning, we were about 40% of the way there. We had just raised a little bit over $20,000, which is incredible. Opening night's a big night, though. So, don't let us down as we go on with our festival. We really appreciate any support that you can give. As a nonprofit, Milwaukee Film can't do all the things that we do, whether it's this festival or our year-round education programs. Any of it can't happen without the support of our donors and, of course, our members. So members watching in the audience, thank you so very much for your support. We really appreciate it. And if you're not a member, please do consider joining. You get discounts on tickets, on passes. You get a little appreciation, but most importantly, you help us keep that mission going, presenting festivals like this and doing all that we do year round with film and the community and making sure everyone has great films to see. This evening, we have 3 film teams that are joining us. We have the director from Some Kind of Heaven, the team behind Don't Text Back, which is a short film in our Midnight Shorts program, whose title I'm not allowed to say on the internet, and the team from The End of Us. First, I'd like to welcome on screen with me, Lance Oppenheim, the director of Some Kind of Heaven.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for coming to Milwaukee.
I love your whole system. The animated video, whoever did it, they deserve 10 bags of popcorn, as the people say. It was really beautiful.
Yeah.
Very transported.
We can connect you with them. They're local, so if you need some animation done, I know who to call.
Whoa, cool.
Next project is all animated. So I want to start with kind of the first question, which is the origin. When and how did you become aware of the villages and the potential for this film? Like, walk us through that early process.
Well, so I'm from Florida, and I grew up like most Floridians. The villages was kind of local lore. One of those kind of sandwiched between all the Florida man stories. There would always be a kind of a tall tale that would, emerge from the villages and end up in the local newspaper. I was from South Florida, so about 4.5 hours away. But that didn't stop stories like, elderly folks arrested for public indecency, or, high rates of STDs, travel inside the world's largest retirement community. Those things were like around when I was in middle school. But I only started thinking about wanting to make a film about the villages after finishing a different film. I made a movie about a guy living on a cruise ship for 20 years, a dude who chose to leave behind his family and his friends and just escape reality in its entirety and live in, kind of a self-contained utopian world on a Royal Caribbean cruise ship, a world of like wet t-shirt competitions and stuff. So after making that film, I wanted to kind of keep going deeper. And around that same time, I had seen a statistic that the Villages had become one of the fastest growing cities in the country. And knowing a lot about the world there, how it was basically designed to look like the 1950s, 1960s, an America that maybe never was, but maybe exists for some baby boomers when they think about their childhood. I thought, like, holy shit, there's a total, this is not an isolated incident. This is a phenomenon. There's literally 140,000 people living inside of this palm-fringed plastic bubble world. And I felt like I needed to go make that movie. So yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting to me that you're sort of transfixed by seeming utopian spaces and kind of unpacking and complicating that notion that these two films sort of continue in that kind of vein, not as like, I don't know, not as a series, but there's something you're interested in there, I think, in terms of I don't know, like an imagined community sort of thing. We won't talk about Benedict Anderson, but so as a Floridian, so you were like, it's either Florida Man or The Villages. Those are the films that I have as my choice. Was there things that were surprising to you then, once you got there and got kind of under the hood?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's always like the thing I'm always trying to do is not if I were to take on or tackle a Florida Man-esque subject or a story of that has, I think, great significance to the outside world and has attracted many journalists from all over to report on it a million times, I'm always trying to find a different way to present that story. And the movie of Some Kind of Heaven, or the story of Some Kind of Heaven, isn't necessarily the story of The Villages. It's something that that is very personal to me. That's much more about, romance, relationships. It's much more about how getting older is strange, which is, I think, a sentiment that anyone who ages probably experiences. And it's also a movie about how, just because you grow older doesn't mean you necessarily grow wiser. So a lot of those things certainly came to me from spending time in the Villages, and a lot of the Busby Berkeley-esque stuff that's in the movie, the cyclical nature of the golf cart, synchronized drill team. I wanted to make something that also felt like it was drenched in the atmosphere of that place. And also, when you look at, I feel like, more contemporary visions of Florida, when you look at like Harmony Korine's work with Spring Breakers and The Beach Bum, when you look at Michael Mann's Miami Vice, when you look at, when you look at movies that try to retain the essence of a setting and use everything in the cinematic arsenal to get you there, that was also something I wanted to do. Even though this is a documentary, I wanted to take people on an immersive experience into that world, a place that can be really cheerful and kind of this forced optimism that also can be really deadening and terrifying, and exploring the Disneyfication of death in all of its glory.
Yeah. I want to go a little further on that aesthetic question. Really, sort of, the film sometimes teases documentary versus constructed, and I'm interested in sort of your choices around color and composition. There's sort of that, you've sort of referenced a handful of things in Busby Berkeley, and there's this sort of like fantasy fictional space. Was that always like clear to you? Is that something that the Villages themselves kind of evoked upon you? Can we talk a little about some of those more aesthetic compositional choices that are so stark and very different from the aesthetics of Florida that we might otherwise see?
Yeah. I think, I mean, it was like when I first got there, I spent a lot of time without a camera, just embedding myself with a bunch of folks who live there. And, like anytime, if you were to step into the Villages, I feel like it feels like it's production designed and set designed for its residents, right? It feels almost like, I don't know, like a Paul Verhoeven, David Lynch, Ronald Reagan Morning in America commercial in real life. So like all those things, I knew I wanted to pay kind of homage to those things, even though this was a documentary. I like the whole place is so perfectly composed, perfectly manicured, and constantly groomed that I knew that like cinematically I couldn't just shoot the movie like a fly on the wall. I wanted the audience to feel the reality distortion effects of what it feels like to be there. So that meant that our frames needed to be as immaculately framed as the world there. And that meant for me, if we're kind of looking back, harkening back to an era that once existed and maybe it didn't at all, I also wanted to kind of put the movie in like a square aspect ratio that kind of harkened back to like the Academy ratios of the yesteryear. And I think speaking to like, however, none of the elements in this movie are staged in a traditional sense. All the stuff that happens in it is real. But the way we filmed most of the film is that we worked in collaboration with our subjects. They almost were like performers performing the very stories of their own lives in highly like choreographed ways, where I would, be in there in a real situation. I'd be, at the pool with Dennis, the gigolo who's in the film, trying to swipe up a wealthy widow, or I'd be with Anne and Reggie in the film, who were in marriage counseling. And I would be riffing off of the reality of their situations. And I would, film something, maybe I'd miss something, I'd ask them to kind of do it over again. And I would make sure the camera would be in the right place at the right time. So a lot of that felt not only true to the experience of being there, where I think, again, there's that blurring weirdness of reality, and you never really know where you are at any point in time. And I wanted the audience to feel that, but also I felt like, as a way of making the movie, I feel like they tend to think this is true of any location, but anytime you bring a camera in anywhere, you immediately corrupt all kinds of reality. And me being, 3 generations younger than virtually every subject in this film, any place I went, even without a camera, I stuck out like a sore thumb. So I wanted to lean into that more, create a bubble inside the bubble, and I think in doing so, I honestly think, leaning into the artifice, we made a truer film.
Yeah. It's interesting because so many documentarians would be like, no, I am not going to like co-create with these subjects. Were they willing, co-conspirators, to sort of like tackle like, all right, well, how do I want to visually represent the, I'm my favorite detail is the there are 6 calendars on the wall behind that. You're in this one scene, you're going to be drawn to the pets that are lovingly enjoying one another's company. No, there's 6 calendars on the wall in that scene. There's so many wonderful details, and I'm sort of recognizing that a lot of that may have been through this kind of co-creation.
Well, some of that stuff.
That was just there.
I'd say like most of the time, it's like the process, and we're cribbing this from the great photographer Larry Sultan, who unfortunately passed away several years ago. But he described his process as riffing off of reality, where he would photograph real subjects and real lived, moments, real routines. He wouldn't really necessarily bring any artificial lighting equipment, nothing like that. He would just lean into it and kind of pose people a little bit. And that was what we would do. So those calendars are in fact there. Those are real. We didn't move them or anything. But the question would be, how do we frame something? And can we stick those things in the back of the frame somewhere? How do we find that image? And I think like that same level of thought that Larry Sultan had, it's also in the work of Ulrich Seidel, the Austrian filmmaker, who we obviously, if you're familiar with his work, that was like someone we also were aesthetically borrowing from. But also movies that I grew up with, like Edward Scissorhands, which is shot in Tampa, or Cocoon, the Ron Howard movie, which is shot in a different part of Florida. And that all those that like bright nuclear sunsets that seem like really beautiful at first, but also cancerous and chemical. Like that was the energy we were trying to channel and vibrate into. And in terms of collaboration, I mean, our subjects, if someone were to do the same thing for me, I don't know if I would want to be in a film this way, because this is a film where a lot of really intense stuff happens, and I think our relationship really was formed just on this mutual bedrock of trust and comfort with each other. We got to know each other extremely well before we even started rolling a frame of the movie. So our relationships came first. We still talk like once a weekend. I have I have like a scheduled call with each of our subjects. I have to catch up with Barbara. I haven't talked to her in about 2 months now, but Dennis calls me once a weekend and sends me emails from a funeral home where he gets his mail. It's a long story. And, Reggie and him have become friends in real life. There's a whole kind of thing unto itself. But that was the other thing. I mean, in terms of casting the film, I was trying to find people who were natural performers, who were excited about being on camera, and were in people who were completely uninhibited. And to be honest, like gave less of a fuck about like where they were in life and how they existed as people, and didn't have that self-consciousness that I think I have and so many people have when you're younger.
Yeah. You mentioned being sort of an outsider generationally to, your subjects and standing out. And I'm interested in sort of, however, you say that through making the film, this isn't just a film about, hey, this is this weird oddball place, but it's really about like aging and relationships and sort of, what do you do? What do you do when you've stopped having sort of these, like, here are the things that I'm supposed to be doing on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday? How has that response been sort of across different ages? You've been, you premiered this film at Sundance in person. We did that. And sort of it's been, you sort of on a long journey, the 2020, 2021 long film journey that many filmmakers are on. I'm interested in hearing about the responses and if there's anything in the way that people are seeing the film that is surprising for you as the filmmaker.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been a long ride, and I think the ride is finally coming to an end. I imagine, at least. But it was interesting. I think the experience of seeing the film in a movie theater versus seeing it at home is very different. And I'm very grateful to have had that experience at one time, which feels like 15 years ago. But I think when the film was enjoyed or experienced with an audience, I think people were able to see the comedy of the film maybe a little bit more. It's a film that is, I think, makes you laugh and then kind of hits you in the gut and makes you want to cry. That's natural to the stories that were naturally kind of unfolding. But the movie has found an audience, which has been really nice. And Magnolia Pictures put out the film. It's going to be on Hulu, I think, in 2 weeks from now. And it's interesting to see the different, online audiences experience it. If you Google the film, you'll see a lot of hate reviews. The movie got review bombed by conservatives who live in the villages, who hate the New York Times, who happen to be a co-producer on the film. But a lot of people have I think younger audiences to some degree find the film a little bit more surprising because they're, for what it's worth, there aren't, for my money's worth, there isn't a whole lot of films out there that are about, that feature older folks, but aren't necessarily about the experience of being old. This is a movie about people, not old people or older people. And that was very important to me. And I think, and also just in terms of making the film, I was in my own version of a Peter Pan syndrome, like many folks are, and still, were and are in the villages. I was about to graduate college when I first started making this film. And, I think I was in some ways the very age that many people who live in the villages were trying to return back to. So spiritually, I think we were on a similar wavelength. I think everyone was looking to kind of re-experience the youth of college, the parties of college, smoking a joint, having a drink of college. All of that stuff was, I think naturally allowed me to gravitate towards the folks in the movie that are on the screen. But yeah, I'd say it's interesting. I think younger audiences are able, I think, see it probably more as a horror film, which is weird. And I think older audiences are able to find the comedy and, I think I am a Jewish person, and I've always been raised with the sense of humor that when life really throws lemons at you and you really can't dodge them, laugh as they hit you and pelt you, and then try to make lemonade out of the remaining lemons on the ground. I think that's and that's the energy that I hope is in the movie as well.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, as you put, like the film centers older adults, but doesn't center age, right? It's sort of, which I think is really is very unique. And now I'm like, I wish I had gotten the chance to see it in a theater, because I imagine that, like, Waiting for Guffman, it's one of those, different people are laughing at different times. There's this like popcorn of laughter that's one of my favorite cinema experiences. So maybe, we'll reopen a cinema and we'll show it, and we'll all come and laugh at different moments. What are you working on next? We've talked about what's next for the film, which is watch it at the Milwaukee Film Festival. And if you miss it, or rewatch it then when it's on Hulu in a couple of weeks. What are you working on? Anything we can keep an eye out for?
Yes, I've spent most of the pandemic, like many people, in a malaise. And then I feel like I've come out of that malaise the last several months. So I've been working on a fiction film that hopefully you will know more of soon, eventually, if you go on any websites. But I hope that would even make it to a website. Who knows? But I'm working on a fiction film, and that I just finished the screenplay for, and I'm also working on a documentary series that will be very fun with these great filmmakers who made that show Wild Wild Country. So I've been working on a few, probably too many things, and I need to just focus and finish a few things. But it's the story of everybody's life. There's not enough time on this planet, and you want to do more than you can actually accomplish, I guess.
There's so many great stories to tell, right?
Yeah, and I'd love to get Christopher Guest, if anybody knows him. Let's get him in the room. Anyway, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, we'll all keep our eyes out. Thank you so much, Lance, for your film, for your time, for joining us in Milwaukee virtually. We'll get you here in person someday soon.
Thank you. Really a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you. See ya.
Yeah. And I'm going to turn the mic over to Anna Sampers for our next Q&A. Hey, Anna.
Hi. Thanks, Kara. That was a great Q&A. As Kara mentioned, I'm Anna Sampers. I am the Programming Administration Director for Milwaukee Film, and it is my pleasure to welcome to the screen the co-directors and co-writers for the short film Don't Text Back, Mariel Sharp and Kay Adelaide.
Hi.
Hi. Welcome.
Thank you.
I love your hair, by the way.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, you guys, you made a great film. I loved it. Obviously, as we showed it in the festival, we have it in the festival. To kick things off, can you talk a little bit about where the inspiration for this film came from?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to go?
Sure. Yeah. So we have a lot of friends who go on a lot of dates and tell a lot of horror stories, which in some ways are comedic, metaphorical horror stories, but sometimes they really seem truly horrifying. And so we kind of wanted to find a way to evoke that in the film, to have a dating struggle be something that's actually horrifying in the form of this magical necklace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is sort of like a metaphor for toxic masculinity.
Yeah, and the control that people can feel even just after a couple dates with someone from an app.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a really good metaphor, I might add. So you both are the co-writers of the film, and can we talk about a little bit about what that writing process was like? The dialogue is so great and so funny, and as I was watching it, having, especially a short film, any film, but especially a short, I think, having a short film that's actually funny. I laughed out loud watching it, by myself. Having a short film that's actually funny is so hard to do. So how did you do it?
Oh, thank you. I'm glad I made you laugh. That's definitely the intention. Yeah, so we did co-write. Kay has more of a profile in comedy than I do, but where we really cross over is in genre cinema. But but I think a lot of the humor, I think, comes from you. And it was a collaborative process also with the actors as well.
Mm-hmm.
We worked a lot with Nancy and Danielle, who played the two leads, and they're both really funny people. We had seen Nancy, who plays Jaren, doing stand-up, and then that's how we found out about her, and we approached her to be in the film. And Danielle is someone we've both known for a really long time, and who is always telling these kind of stories in real life. And so that was like kind of
have to play this.
a great way to like, use some of her great kind of lived experience to draw in for the film.
I think one of the ways that the collaboration worked really well is that I wrote into the first couple drafts 10 times more jokes, 90% of which being terrible, and Marielle picks out the best, the best 1%.
That's
I didn't say
the way to do it. Let me throw it to a question that just popped up in the chat, because it kind of leads into where I was going as well. Someone in the chat asks, were the two leads inspired by real people or characters in your lives, including yourselves?
I love that question. I mean, yeah, definitely inspired by people in our lives. We're Montreal based, so a lot of the kind of types that you see kind of represented, like the Jaren type, is a very Montreal character. I think she travels well. I think there's people like Jaren everywhere, but like the kind of
into astrology, into crystals, into being better than other people, but also somehow charming and interesting and engaging. But,
like definitely have met a few Jarens.
I would say not just a Montreal type.
Yeah, that's what's been fun about getting to travel virtually with the film, is getting to see how relatable the characters are to everyone, and definitely the lead, Kelly, played by Danielle Point. Her character is partially based on her, I'd say.
Yeah.
And other friends also who are in similar dating struggles, as Kay was saying.
Yeah, and also, I think the script was a bit more broad when we first started it, but then once we had both these actresses on board, we kind of refined it to reflect their strengths more and their funniest parts more. And so in a way, the characters kind of became these exaggerated forms of their existing personalities or personas more than they were when we started.
And the character of Will, the pianist, is absolutely based on dating horror stories from friends. There are some anecdotes in the film that are true, that like pulled from different sources.
Yeah, we had to tone down because it's too strange for fiction.
But,
I felt that like that whole character just seemed like a great amalgamation of just like the toxic masculine, like dating apps are terrible. I think everyone would agree. And he was just a perfect vehicle to have that play out.
It was kind of like, and with regards to kind of being about us, I think it's more about kind of like we're two lesbian women, like happily living our lives, and like kind of when our friends come to us and they're dating these terrible guys, it's really hard to not be like, this guy's terrible, like you have to get away from him. So I think the film was kind of based on how we feel about those situations, but with a lot of love too, and understanding that like, the film is funny and it makes a joke about it, but like there are these like intense power dynamics between men and women in like these dating scenarios, and it is frustrating and it's hard, and we have a lot of empathy for everyone who's been in that situation.
Yeah, in real life situations, we speak to our friends with kindness and care, but then there is some catharsis in writing a character like Jaren who just says, well, if you hate it so much, why don't you just change your sexual orientation already? Like, why don't you just do something about it? Like, she gets to say the things we are too nice to say.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that's the great thing about genre films, horror films, that you can kind of take those very real, sometimes very serious feelings from real life and just sort of blow them up, explode them, get crazy with it, go way beyond, hopefully, what would happen in real life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the art direction? I thought, the set design, their outfits, everything about all those plants, everything about it was so great. How did that all come together?
Sure. Yeah. So actually, it was shot entirely in this double room that we're in right now,
Oh, wow.
where we live. That's not how we normally have it decorated. Our friend, who's an excellent production designer, Jeremy Sandor, he came in and just completely gave the place a facelift and really Jarened it up, really made it look like a idyllic Pinterest environment. And we really are super grateful that he came on board in the film, because I think it really elevates the look a lot. And Alba Daza, who was also working on the art. She's amazing as well. Yeah.
Something's kind of fun is that because it's very like shoestring budget, we just financed the film ourselves with like, I think like $1,500, like really not high budget. So we sourced a lot of things from like trade groups and borrowing people's crystals from people online, and like just sort of gathering things and using what we had at home to sort of pull it together.
That's great. Well, it really came together. It looked wonderful.
Thank you. I know after I was like, I don't want to really take it down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You get a free apartment makeover.
We still have the branch prop in our hallway, the big branch with hanging
nice.
flowers from it, because we couldn't bear to get rid of it.
Nice. I'm so curious, how did you animate the necklace?
So I am a special effects artist as well. I'm trying to more pivot into writing, directing, but I can't help but when I write something also figure out the effects for it. In this case, because of our budget, I was doubling as the effects artist. So that was essentially a little puppet. It was like a locket that had been modified to open this way, and then it had a thread on top to open the mouth and a rod at the back to move the body. And so yeah, we puppeteered it like that on set, and then I was also the VFX artist, so I went in After Effects and painted it out in every frame, which was very time consuming. But
yeah, it sounds like. Well, it turned out great. And I'm curious, what was the goo that she stuck her feet in to getting rid of the necklace?
Electrolytic solution. That was just mica dust, which is basically eyeshadow, like raw eyeshadow mica dust that you put in water, and it makes that great swirling effect.
Nice. Nice behind the scenes tidbits. And what was your favorite part of making the film?
So hard to decide. I mean, talking about the electrolytic solution, for some reason when we filmed that, I just couldn't stop laughing, like seeing her come out of the bucket in these like wet weird socks that I got at like the dollar store. I was just like, it's funny you mentioned that, because that was actually just a really funny moment for me. Like, I think it was getting to be a bit late at night, and we were still filming, and I was just like just cracking up. Yeah. But honestly, like the best thing was we actually shot with all female and or LGBT crew, and that was the first. We had been trying to do that for years, and this was the time that it really happened, and that was incredible. It was so much fun, such a good energy, so efficient, like just really good vibes all around.
Yeah, I agree. That was my favorite part also, was the idea of trying to make something without sort of having to rely on patriarchal systems, without having to ask favors from men at film depots.
Or kiss any butts.
Yeah, exactly. That we were like, you know what, we're going to do this ourselves. Maybe it will be 5% lower production value because we're not getting a special deal on color grading from some random guy, but we're going to just do it ourselves. And we're really happy that it worked out, and that we, as a thought experiment, realized, yes, you can do this without.
Yeah, it's very empowering.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like that really, I didn't know that the whole cast and crew was made up, but I feel like that kind of like that energy and that feeling comes across on screen.
Oh, that's
So yeah.
Thank you for saying that.
And have the two of you worked together before? Are you going to continue working together?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we met in film school years ago and started working together, and then started dating, and kind of our creative relationship has really blossomed, and we've worked together before, mostly actually as me producing and Kay doing effects. But then we decided we had to do some writing and directing together because we're really aligned on that. And Kay and I have another project coming up that maybe we can talk about. Yeah,
so there's a project that I've wrote and directing, and Mariella's producing along with another producer as well. And it's called Transvengeance, and it's essentially a revenge movie about a trans woman who was brought to the brink of death and then comes back in a new life, new persona, and brings vengeance on all the people who wronged her, who each sort of represent a different facet of society that is holds trans people back.
So it's a dark, really bloody revenge, dark comedy kill list.
That sounds amazing. I cannot wait to see it. When it's done, you definitely have to submit to the Milwaukee Film Festival.
Oh, great. Yeah, we totally will.
Nice. And what's next for Don't Text Back? Is it sort of done with its festival run? Will it live online?
So we're just near the tail end of the festival run. I think it started last June, so it's been almost a year on the circuit. And I think we're kind of considering the different options for where it will live online. But we will definitely keep you posted when when it's available.
Great. Well, thank you both so much for joining me. We're so excited to have the film as part of the festival.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us, and thank you for your questions.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And with that, I would love to throw it over to Kirsten Larson, our programming director.
Hi, everybody. My name's Kirsten, like Anna said, and I am thrilled to be joined by the team for the film The End of Us, which we are so excited to have at our film festival. So we have the two directors, Stephen and Henry, and producers Lovell and Claudia. Also plays roles in the film. Thanks all for joining us.
Thanks for having us. Excited to be a part of the festival.
So Stephen and Henry, I have to know, you came from a background of working in TV and shorts. Why did you decide to make your feature debut during a pandemic?
Good question. Well, Stephen and I had been looking for opportunities to collaborate for a while. We, unfortunately, when the pandemic arrived in March of last year, all of those plans really were thrown by the wayside, and everybody had their projects canceled and so forth. So we were just looking for something to work on, like to keep ourselves occupied. Initially, it was not a feature. We were talking about shorts. But we had the time. We were lucky that we owned our own cameras, and we were like, we have the resources to do something like this. Like, why don't we just give it a shot?
Yeah, and I think in retrospect too, maybe we also just needed to occupy ourselves in some consolidated creative way to make some sense of what we all went through last year. So
distracting ourselves.
Yeah.
And how did you come up with the idea for the story in the film?
So the idea is actually, it's partly inspired by and played by our lead actor, Ben Coleman, who is a friend of all of ours. We've worked with him before. And he, unfortunately was in the midst of an actual breakup with his, at the time, 4-year relationship. They lived together. And so just as friends, just checking in on him, we kind of heard about the whole saga of kind of what was going on, as we all do with our friends in the midst of relationship issues. And they ended up actually, unfortunately, breaking up. And then a couple of days later, the LA lockdown was instituted. So it was like any prospect of either of them moving out or living with a friend was immediately complicated. And, but Ben was, always in sort of, he's a very funny guy. He's very comedic. And so even in the heart of darkness here, he was finding some great irony in all of this. And in some way or another, we were like, that's a really interesting story for like a movie. And he was the first one to be like, oh, I'm down, I'm in, because he's a brilliant actor as well. So that's how it started.
And I would love to hear from Level and Claudia how you got involved with this film, also during a pandemic.
Well, Claudia has the best story. She was there at ground zero, so I will cede the floor entirely to her.
Well, I just have the privilege and joy of having worked previously with Steve and Henry, and I have the extra privilege of dating Henry. We all work together before there was any romantic situation, but and they're roommates, so we were already in a bubble, and they were very eager to make a project. And because we've all worked together and are so used to such small crews, I felt sort of a perfectly positioned to understand what they needed on set and what kind of support you need with such a small crew, and was very eager to work with them just because I love their work and was really excited to be part of the project.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say it's funny. I almost think of myself more as the first fan of the film than as much as a producer, because I was able to see the cut that Stephen and Henry had done before they went into post, and I kind of instantly was just in awe of what they had accomplished that sort of broke every rule that I had previously thought about filmmaking in terms of, you need at least X amount of money, you need X amount of people in order to create a project that will reach mainstream distribution. And I was so kind of in awe of what they had done, because Henry and I had been friends for several years. We'd gone to college together. And when I saw it, I basically just kind of begged them to let me come on the team and help them with post and then with the marketing and everything from there. So I just feel lucky that I got to hop on the moving train.
We were also doing quite a bit of begging, I think, too, because I was calling Level, like, even when we were, I think, about to shoot or we had just wrapped, I was calling Level for advice, because he has a wealth of experience as an independent filmmaker and producer, and has made a bunch of films in the past, and this was our first feature. So like Level was my first call, being like, I just made a movie and I don't know what to do. Like,
and I was like, what do you mean you made a movie? What do you mean you made a movie? It's
like coming home from the hospital with a baby or something.
Yeah.
Like, it's crying. Do I feed it? So we were very, very privileged to have Level come aboard.
Oh, I entirely feel like the lucky one.
Well, we also feel lucky that we're able to share your movie. So it all turned out great for all of us. But for Henry and Stephen, I'd love to know what the writing process was like, sort of, since I feel like you guys did such a good job representing a very real experience of the pandemic, but then you're also making the movie as the pandemic is progressing. So what was sort of like the give and take of like, this is a certain stage of the pandemic that we're talking about, but now it's changed more because it's been another month and everything else crazy has happened that we couldn't have imagined the month before. So yeah, just what was writing like?
Well, yeah, I mean, we knew that we were going to have to do a tremendous amount of sort of improvisation and working with our two very talented lead actors, Ben Coleman and Ali Vinciano, who we're lucky that we also had worked with them so much in the past. They had played an on-screen couple in a few shorts that we had made. So we knew what their chemistry was and their dynamic. So we used that as a foundation. And then we obviously inspired in part by Ben's personal struggle with, his ex. And we built what was essentially like a kind of, either you could call it a short script or a long treatment of about 60 pages, which, some scenes were as, full dialogue, some scenes were just a couple of action lines. And then we decided, okay, like if we're let's try to shoot this in script order. And we sort of figured out the story as we went along.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, to your point, I think by the time we started shooting in May, you know, we were like, I guess we had a month and a half or 2 months of real life to sort of kind of continue to adjust sort of this outline, this treatment, and because you know, as we mentioned, of course, the lockdown being a huge part of the timeline, but then also, you know, the world was developing. We were checking the news every day while we were shooting the film, and there were certain landmarks that just sort of naturally, I think, occurred as we were all. It's like, okay, this is Fauci's third press conference. Okay, that's where we are in their life, you know.
So there was a sort of almost pseudo documentary element to it, and it's crazy to think just like how little we knew back in the beginning of May when we were filming, and things continue to. I mean, you know, things continue to change so rapidly. So that was a big challenge. It's like, what do we do include? What can we not include? But we tried to just kind of just keep it as honest to what we and our friends were experiencing as possible.
Yeah, I think it's great how it's sort of like a good time capsule for what a lot of us experienced in a very weird time. But as you were mentioning, your fabulous cast, I also, like, I don't even think I noticed this when I was watching the movie, but Claudia, you played like 4 characters. How did that come to happen? And how was it? Did you have a method to each character?
My goodness, where to begin? Yes. I learned the flute for the role. I was really, in 3 weeks, that's all. No, I was in it out of necessity. We were like, let's throw people in. Just your guys' luck that I also have an undergrad in theater. So lucky you guys. But that's part of having a crew of 5. You just, you know, I would have put on a mustache and played, I don't know, Derek's character if I had to get it done.
Would have been a different performance, but it would have been interesting.
I think it would have done something interesting.
Well, it definitely turned out great. Also, with casting, the scene where Allie puts her face in the cake, how was that? Like, did you have to shoot that several times? Was it just a one and done? What kind of cake was it? Like, tell me everything.
Such a perceptive question. Yeah, so that scene was, we at the time were actually shooting a very different scene that we had scripted out where she had a kind of awkward interaction with the person delivering the cake.
That was an extra role of mine that got cut. Yeah. I played the delivery person. There was a whole backstory. They didn't like it.
And Claudia had done the painstaking work of drawing out. We bought a cake from like Ralph's or something, and she threw the happy birthday. And then, but we just kind of in the moment thought it would be much better to try to cut, you know, what was essentially 2 pages of dialogue and replace it with just the visual of her sticking her face in a cake. So we only really got, I think, 1 take of it, but we wanted to get a close up. So like we shot the wide, and then we were like, okay, don't move your face out of the cake. So she's sticking her face in the cake.
Holding her breath for like a minute, maybe 2 minutes.
And then like running up. And then I also have a bad problem with like, I shake the camera a lot when I laugh. So I'm like trying to keep the camera steady. But yeah, one of them.
Allie, she took the cake in that. She was made, because we also, I don't know what, we got 1 cake too.
That was it.
We were like, this is it.
Going to get destroyed.
That's
I got
true.
1.
That's true.
One as a prop.
But she knocked it out. Yeah, that's one of our favorite moments in the movie.
Yes, she definitely did a great job. So I'm also curious because I feel like, I don't know, I have this question a lot for documentaries, but I feel like it kind of applies for this movie too, because you're creating a film as the events you're depicting are unfolding. So how did you decide when you wanted the movie to end? Because obviously the pandemic is still ongoing, but you needed a point for your characters to have some sort of resolution.
Yeah, I mean, we debated that question quite a bit and toyed with the ending. We did even a couple of pickups after we finished sort of our principal photography to try to make some tweaks to the ending. I mean, we did wrestle with the question of whether we wanted these 2 to end up together. And even when we were in the edit room, we were like, I don't know, maybe they should end up together. I'm glad we made the decision we did, but
Yeah, we just vote. No, yeah, I think that's right. We also, we harken back to when we were in that editing process and actually deliberating on what ending kind of feels right. It also came back to, well, what was the sort of premise of this movie, which was Nick refusing, well, being unable to move out, and no matter what, obviously you got to say goodbye to the characters at some point, and it seemed to us the most fitting to let the change in residence and sort of there being some, I'm trying not to spoil it now. I'm thinking about
No,
this.
it doesn't matter. Everyone knows.
Letting there be solidarity and understanding between the two characters that are now finally out of living in the same space. Because of course we knew the pandemic wasn't going anywhere, and there certainly weren't any, end dates in sight to sort of look at as when the movie should end. So yeah, I think that was part of it.
And also, like, this sounds corny, but like, we really were trying to be deliberate about saying, like, the movie's really not about the pandemic. The pandemic is background, like the movie's about the relationship. And so what's important is resolving that question and resolution to the pandemic itself. I mean, we certainly didn't know what was going to happen. So yeah, that was kind of the North Star.
Well, and I will say too, one of the things that even when I first saw the film, what I loved so much about the ending, without spoiling anything, is that regardless of what you might want, or an audience could debate about the couple being in love, there is still just so much love that you do feel at the end, regardless of what direction they might take, that their mutual acknowledgement of their history together and their compassion for each other is so undeniable that it's kind of it's kind of like you would be satisfied whether they stay together or they go their separate ways, because I thought what was so beautiful about it was that either ending felt earned.
Yeah, well, that's my favorite thing about the end of the film with the will they, won't they, is getting to have that conversation after where someone's like, they shouldn't have been together, and someone's like, no, they were perfect for each other. And that, in life, you don't often, feel like you have a very clear-cut answer. And I feel like those characters are very true to life because things are so complicated, and there are sort of like, you can see it going many ways at the end.
Absolutely. So one thing I would love to hear about that, I hope we all have big prospects for after the pandemic is over, whenever that will be. But do you think there are any lessons that you learned having to make a movie on these very extreme circumstances that you will then apply to future projects that you work on?
For me, I think that, well, I think Steven and I both suffer from, we're both overthinkers, and we often get in our own way and tend to edit ourselves. And in a very strange way, the circumstances of the pandemic actually created an opportunity for us to work on something without putting pressure on ourselves for it to be great or anything like that. We were just like, we just want to work on something to occupy our time until, life gets back to normal. And so giving ourselves that space to work on something and putting less pressure on ourselves was actually extremely helpful, and just pushing ourselves to get out there and like, let's just start shooting something and like not worry so much about getting everything perfect. So I think that was certainly a lesson is, being open to just like not waiting for the perfect idea and just like getting started on an idea.
Yeah, here to that. That's like verbatim what I was going to say. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no perfect time. Yeah.
Well, we are so excited to see what all of you do next, but for now, we're just over the moon that we're able to include your film in our festival. And like Kara mentioned at the beginning, you can all vote for our audience award on the film page. There's a little ballot for you to click on. 5 is the best one. I won't tell you about the other ones because you don't need to know about those. And you have until the 19th to vote, so you have plenty of time. And please tell people to check out these movies. They are all available online and on your TVs. And beyond that, I hope you all have a great night, and thank you so much.
Thank you
so much. Have a good night.